Yeah, I think it's something that's always evolving, right? You're always this week, oh, it's great. Next week, it's not so good, and then I think with regard to the free agency, particularly if you're looking to fill holes, you'd always look and see, is this somebody who can kill penalties? Is this somebody who can do X or Y and help out?
Front right.
Hey guys, Josh from Miami. Question for each of you. Paul, just to start with you, what's the balance of getting to what you do well versus taking away what the Rangers do well going into the series?
You don't want anything. You don't want to have to introduce something that your hockey team's never heard before, right? That you get to play a different style of team. So that would be something that we talk about all year long, kind of trying to put teams in different buckets. So really fast, very skilled hockey team, very strong power play. So we would talk about that when we get to play the Rangers. Then in the playoffs, it won't be the first time that they've heard the important areas. Then in our game, we feel we're going to have to be very, very strong to limit their strengths.
And then, Bill, just because Paul talked about this earlier this morning, he basically was saying that sometimes there's a hangover when you make the finals, and then the next year just doesn't happen. That's not the case. In putting this team together, what have you seen, and why do you think the response has been what it has been?
It's only happened to me once, so I can't really speak as an authority, but I can speak for myself and tell you how rotten it felt going home empty-handed, and then how just day to day, I think I approach things, and I know Paul, and I think everybody sort of had that feeling in their stomach, and I don't know that we necessarily had any hangover at all. I think it was just, this is the way we do things, and this is what the coaches have been preaching and starting to come together.
Left side, second row, Shaw.
Paul, as a fan of the game, what does it mean to you to be able to ply your trade in a series like this in a building as historic as the one you're going to play in?
I'm going to answer it differently. There's a great line once, Brendan Shanahan, when he was playing. I think it was more derogatory to the Hartford Whalers / Carolina Hartford situation than anybody said you want to play in big games, right? Because he had come through that St. Louis, Detroit, Chicago at that time. They were all big, heavy teams, all powerful teams. So he just loved coming to the rink. And it's not so much the bigger stage for the coach as a person or the player, but for the game, right? You want the game to be promoted, to do it in Madison Square Garden. I mean, that's the spot. So you feel like then you get to be a part of the game, right? You work in the National Hockey League. It's a dream. I'm not so sure it's not still for me. And then you're gonna play in a conference final and open an MSG. That's exciting, for sure.
Thank you.
Front right, Mike.
Bill, we've talked to Paul a lot the last couple of weeks about Anton Lundell, and it just feels like as this playoff continues, he's just slowly but surely really becoming a real go-to for you guys in every facet. When you drafted him, I mean, did you expect this type of development path, and is it hard to be patient when you get to this point, and how much does 50 playoff games for this kid really just allow him to feel confident in these situations?
I liked him when he was a peewee. No, it's prior to coming, he had a leadership role on the men's team in Helsinki, so you knew that was in him. He played on the men's team in the World Championships. I know it was a COVID year, but he had elevated himself to sort of roles of responsibility within the league that he played in the national team. And I give the coaching staff so much credit for the patience part of it. And it's hard. It's hard night to night. A little bit like parenting sometimes. The intellectual part of you says, of course, be patient. The player's 20 or 21 or 22. And then the emotional part, he's like, oh my God, I can't believe he made that error. But he's really come along, and I think he's enjoying hockey, and he certainly continues to get better.
Right side, second row, please.
Paul, in terms of the attitude around the group or the mood of the group, how is this year's version different than last year's?
The word that popped in my head last year was a wilder group, and I mean that on the ice, right? It was so much energy, and we still have it. I get everybody to describe this group as a more focused group, and they're not quite as funny, or at least they don't appreciate my humor quite as much. But because they, get on with it, get to the important stuff. That's what I get from them. So okay, that was funny, but get to the important stuff, the hockey. A very focused group in the hockey, and that was true right from the first. We have 5 very difficult days of training camp, and you wonder then, going back to the question earlier about coming off last year, the sense of at least some accomplishment that we maybe don't have to go quite as hard at camp this year. And they went harder, and I know that by how we measured their camp and how they pushed themselves, and it wasn't the coaches yelling and screaming. So they brought a focus back to camp. So a little more, I guess, serious is and not, but last year's team needed to be a little wilder or a little bit more on edge. This team is deeper and is far more disciplined on the ice than last year's team.
Right side, third row.
Hey, Paul. Matthew Tkachuk is obviously leading you in points. I think he spoiled us a little bit last year with the amount of heroics that he had,
Right.
those big moments, game-winning goals, everything else. Within the context of last season, how do you assess his playoffs so far?
Oh, he's been outstanding. So we lost Sam Bennett, I think, in Game 2 of the first series, and missed him for 5 games. And that's when not only did he step up with Anton Lundell, who played very well. He was a big part of Anton coming in between those two wingers. We had a 40-goal guy, a 100-point guy on the other side, and leading him. And that would be, you look at his start of Matthew's year. I think he was still dealing with his injury, and he went a long stretch without putting up the points that maybe we would have expected. But his game was better, right? He's more disciplined. He's matured with this group over 2 years, so I think he's primed. I would never bet against him coming up with some heroics, but it's certainly not the only thing we have to expect now when we come to the rink from him.
Back right.
Bill, just a kind of a broader question. I know the task at hand begins tomorrow, but just from a sense in the few years you've been here with this organization, the growth of the excitement of hockey around the town. For a long time, it was, this would be considered almost like a miracle run. Now, 2 years in a row, it's the norm. It's the expectations, the excitement. What has it been through your eyes to see the way the community has backed the Panthers and that excitement over the way they've played?
It's really nothing short of, thrilling is probably a little too much. But it's, as someone who grew up loving the game and never having had played in the NHL, to see it around and to see the fans and to hear from your friends, oh, I went there and I couldn't get in, it was packed. And just when I walked the dog the first couple of years, no one said a word to me. Now kind of the neighbor sort of knows who you are. Maybe they're not sure, but you see more and more
Stop
Panther
calling
stuff.
the cops on you now.
Yeah. You see more and more Panther stuff, and it's wonderful. It's really exciting for the game.
Take 2 more questions. Front right, Mike.
Just Paul, I remember in the final game in Vegas last year when you were listing the long list of injuries that you guys were playing through. How concerned were you coming into this year that there could be a really slow start with Montour being out and Ekblad, maybe Tkachuk not being 100%, and then to put that in context of sitting here right now?
Oh, I was concerned, for sure. Bill won't take any credit for it, and he blew past the answer, but what management did this summer was fixed the 2 glaring or potentially very dangerous things for us. One, our penalty kill was a weak spot for us last year, and that got fixed. We added Kevin Stenlund on the right-handed centerman, critical part, but also on the back end. Ekman Larson, Kulikov, and Mikkola come in. 2 of those guys, veteran. We had Mahura come in. We signed Balinskis. So what they did is they saw the potential problem and gave us a chance out of the start. And maybe it's always those things, the adversity, that makes you better. We had to come into the year, and I think, Matthew, we talked about Matthew earlier, understood that this wasn't a point production. The first 20 games was going to be survival mode for us, so we had to be good in some hard areas, some defensive areas, and I have full faith that those are conversations that had in the locker room without the coaches in there, because we saw it on the ice. Having those players out gave the leadership an opportunity with the coaches, but more from them, help define our game and be committed to that game.
One more left side, second row, Sean.
Paul, philosophically, because you don't really control it once the game starts, but when you're playing a hot goaltender, a really good goaltender, is it shot quality or shot volume?
Well, sometimes volume turns into quality, so there's a value to that. I don't know, like, we just came through Vasilevsky and Swayman, right? And Swayman had, I think, going into game 2, sitting on a 9.55. So we will assume the continued excellence by the other team's goaltender, and we will not go into a game thinking, hey, we'll be able to put up 6, so don't worry if we give up 5. But that's who we are anyway. We have good offensive weapons as well, but man, now there's just some fantastic goaltenders in this league. You get to this point, you're hitting one.